There's something strangely intimate about the sound of a phone ringing after dark. It doesn't matter if it's a cell phone on a bedside table or an old landline tucked into a quiet corner. At night, the sound feels louder, heavier, as if it's reaching through the stillness just to get your attention. Most of us assume it's a friend or a reminder we forgot to silence or maybe just a wrong number. But when the rest of the house is silent, and the only light comes from a dim lamp or the glow of a screen, even the smallest vibration can feel like it's cutting straight through the dark. Sometimes the ring comes at a moment when you're barely awake, when your breathing is soft and steady, and the world around you has faded into that in-between quiet. And that's when your instincts hesitate just a little, when you notice a faint change in the air or the soft creak of the floor settling in a way it usually doesn't, or even the strange stillness that follows the second ring. It's nothing dramatic, just a tiny shift that makes you pause with your hand hovering over the phone, wondering why the call feels off somehow. Tonight's stories begin in that hesitation. Three real accounts from people who picked up the phone at the wrong moment and heard things they were never meant to hear. These aren't stories about jump scares or loud surprises, they're about the quiet dread that slips in through a simple mistake, the kind anyone could make. Settle in, listen closely, and remember, some calls aren't supposed to be answered, no matter how familiar they sound. I wasn't thinking about the past that night. It was just another quiet evening, the kind where nothing special happens and the world seems to settle into a soft, familiar rhythm. I had finished cleaning up after dinner, turned off most of the lights, and curled up on the couch with a thin blanket draped over me. The room was dim except for the warm glow from a small lamp on the side table, and the low hum of the refrigerator drifted through the doorway from the kitchen. My phone was face down next to me, barely on my mind. I remember feeling unusually relaxed, the kind of rare calm that comes after a long day. It was almost 11 p.m. when the first vibration broke the quiet. A single buzz, the kind you feel more than hear, just enough to pull my attention. I reached for the phone automatically, expecting a notification or some late-night message from a friend. But when I flipped it over, I saw the missed call. No name attached, just a 10-digit number. At first, nothing about it stood out, but then my brain registered the sequence. Something old, something familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. I didn't recognize the number fully yet, but something about it tugged at the edge of memory, like seeing a face you haven't thought about in years. I locked the screen and set the phone down. Wrong number, I told myself. Spam call. It happens. The room settled again and I tried to let the soft, quiet return. But a minute later, the phone buzzed again, not once but twice back to back, the vibration stronger this time as it rattled slightly on the wooden table. A cold prickle moved up my arms. I picked it up slowly, same number, calling again. It took a second longer for the recognition to click, and when it did, my chest tightened. I knew that number. I hadn't seen it in years, not since I blocked it, not since everything happened. The contact was long gone from my phone. The number should have been dead, disconnected, forgotten. I stared at the screen as it lit up with that sequence of digits I thought I'd never see again. The past I had shoved into a corner of my memory now stared back at me in pale white text. I didn't answer, I couldn't. I let it ring until it cut off on its own. The silence afterward felt too heavy, as if the room was waiting for me to breathe. My pulse thudded quietly in my ears. There was no reason for that number to exist anymore. No explanation for how it reached me. I told myself it had to be recycled by the phone company, that someone new must have it now. But even thinking that didn't settle the unease inside me. Less than a minute later, the phone rang again. The same number. The sound was louder this time, sharper, as though slicing through the soft quiet of the room. I didn't move. I just watched it ring, my hand hovering inches above the screen. On the fourth ring, something strange happened. The name field flickered. For a split second, not long enough for me to read it fully, I saw a different text appear where the number had been. A name, the one associated with that number before I blocked it, the one belonging to someone who couldn't possibly be calling me now. Then the screen reverted back to the plain number. My breath caught, the phone kept ringing. I should have turned it off, thrown it across the room, done anything except what I did. But something in me, some mix of fear, disbelief, and the sick curiosity that comes when you're too scared to look away, made me swipe to answer. The moment the line connected, the ringing stopped. Silence filled the phone. But it wasn't empty silence. I could hear something faint on the other end, a soft, shaky sound, breathing, slow, uneven breaths close to the speaker. Whoever or whatever was on the line wasn't speaking, just breathing. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, trying to tell if it was static or if there was really someone there, but the breath grew louder, thicker, and I realized it wasn't the kind of sound a phone line should capture. It was too warm, too close, as if someone was breathing from just inches away. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Who is this? Well, the breathing stopped. For several seconds there was nothing, not even background noise. Then I heard something else. A soft creak like a floorboard shifting under weight. I knew that sound, not from the call, from my living room, a few feet behind me. I froze, the phone trembled slightly in my hand. The room was dim, shadows cast long across the carpet. I turned my head slowly toward the hallway behind the couch. Nothing moved, but the air felt different. Still dense, like someone else was in the room holding their breath. On the phone, the breathing returned, slow, steady, matching my own inhalations by a fraction of a second. And then, quietly, a voice came through. A voice I hadn't heard in years. A voice I thought I would never hear again. It was distorted, faint, like it was pushing through static or distance. But it said my name, softly, slowly, drawn out as though it had taken effort to speak at all. My blood ran cold. Before I could respond, the call dropped. The screen went dark. I stared at my reflection in the black glass, my own face dimly lit by the lamp. My heart pounded so hard it made my hands shake. I didn't want to look behind me. I didn't want to see what had caused that creak on the floor. I forced myself to stand, the blanket falling away from my legs. The room was silent again, painfully silent. No breathing, no footsteps, just that thick, heavy quiet. So suddenly the phone buzzed in my hand. A voicemail. It had been left only seconds before. So I didn't play it, not then. I stared at the notification, my thumb hovering over it, unable to decide whether I wanted to know what was on the recording. Finally, I set the phone down and walked out of the living room, every part of me tense with the awareness of the space behind my back. I slept in my bedroom with the door locked and the lights on, even though the lights didn't help much. The next morning, when the sun finally dragged the darkness away, I listened to the message. It was only 5 seconds long. At first, just breathing, slow, shaky. Then faintly, so faint I had to replay it, I heard the same voice whisper something. Not my name this time, something else. Let me in. I deleted the message and blocked the number again, but I didn't go back to the living room for a week. I kept imagining footsteps behind me, breathing near my ear, someone standing just out of sight. 2 days later, another call came. A different number. Unknown caller IDs. But when I checked the voicemail it left, just breathing, slow and close, I knew it was the same thing. Some numbers don't stay blocked. Some voices don't stay gone. I never thought much about the school after hours. During the day, it was loud, bright, and full of movement, but at night it became something else entirely. A place I tried not to picture once the lights were off and the halls were empty. I had worked there for a few years as part of the administrative staff, and I'd often joke that the building probably had more stories after midnight than it ever did during class hours. Still, the truth is I never expected to deal with any of them personally. The school was supposed to be just a job, not a source of late-night fear. It happened on a Thursday, a night when nothing felt particularly unusual. I had been tired from a long day of meetings and grading assistants, so I went to bed earlier than usual. The air outside was cold and my window rattled lightly from the steady wind. Inside, the house was warm and quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you settle deeper into your blankets. I remember checking my phone one last time before drifting off. No messages. No alarms set for late hours. As everything felt normal. Around 12:17 a.m., my phone started ringing. The sound cut through the silence sharply, sharp enough to yank me out of the light sleep I had just slipped into. At first, I thought it was an alarm, but when I reached for the phone, I saw the call screen glowing in the dark. The caller ID made my throat tighten. Red Oak Middle School main office. I stared at it for a few seconds, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Schools don't call at midnight. Automated systems don't dial staff in the middle of the night either, not unless there's a scheduled emergency test, and nothing like that was happening. I hesitated, letting it ring, expecting it to stop on its own. But it didn't. It kept ringing at a steady pace, soft but persistent. Finally, half asleep and confused, I answered. There was no greeting on the other end, no automated message, just a low hum like the static you hear when someone's phone is pressed against fabric. I said hello once, then twice. No response. The static shifted faintly as if the phone were being moved, but still nothing. I checked the signal, full bars. It wasn't a dropped call. After a long moment, a faint sound rose from the static. Footsteps. Slow, measured, echoing distance. The kind of steps you only hear in wide hallways or empty tiled floors. A late-night custodian, maybe. Someone who accidentally dialed out. That was the only explanation I could think of, but something about the rhythm made my skin crawl. The steps weren't accompanied by the drag of a mop or the wheels of a cart. They were too clean, too deliberate, and one detail hit me harder than the rest. They didn't sound like adult footsteps. They were too light, almost careful. Hello, I said again, softer this time. The footsteps stopped immediately, like whoever was walking had frozen in place. I held my breath and listened. The static settled into a low hiss. Then came something that sent a cold shiver down my spine. A child's breathing. Slow, uneven, close to the phone. Like someone standing very still, holding a phone that was too large for their hand. My voice caught in my throat. Who is this? The breathing hitched, not the way a child cries, but the way someone reacts when they hear their name whispered unexpectedly. Except I hadn't said a name. The breathing grew a little louder, just enough to feel intimate, personal. Then so faint I almost missed it, a voice whispered, Can you come back? My heart dropped. The voice was small, trembling, and painfully familiar in a way I couldn't place immediately. I sat up in bed, gripping the phone. Who is this? Where are you? A soft sniff, then. I'm still here. The call cut out. For a long time, I just sat there staring at the dark screen, The house around me suddenly too silent. My pulse thudded in my ears. The last thing I wanted was to imagine a child alone in the school building after midnight, especially when every door locked automatically at 7 p.m. and only staff badges could open them. Against my better judgment, I called back. The line rang once before redirecting to the school's automated menu, the same robotic voice listing options for attendance, counseling, administration. No child, no footsteps, no whisper. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I arrived at school early, craving daylight and noise. I went straight to the main office and checked the call log on the school phone system. There were no outgoing calls from the building after 6:04 p.m. the night before. I checked the security footage of the main hallways. Empty, completely still, no movement, no lights turning on, no shadows. But the footage did have something odd. At 12:17 a.m., the exact time I got the call, the camera facing the main office flickered. Just once. And in that 2-second distortion, the timestamp glitched and the frame showed something I can't explain. A small figure standing in the doorway of the office. I paused the footage, zoomed in as much as the grainy quality allowed. It looked like a child, maybe 8 or 9. The height, the rounded shoulders, the bowed head. But what unsettled me was the posture, the stillness. They stood perfectly motionless, facing the desk where the main phone rested. When the footage resumed, the figure was gone. The hallway remained empty for the rest of the night. I mentioned it to a coworker I trusted, half expecting her to laugh or brush it off. Instead, her expression changed, tightened. Don't tell me it happened to you too," she whispered. She went on to say that a few staff members over the years had received calls from the school after midnight, always from the office line, always silent at first, sometimes followed by faint breathing, sometimes a whisper. The rumors, ones I'd dismissed before, quickly came back to me. A child who had gone missing decades ago, last seen after school hours. A backpack later found beside the lockers. No forced entry, no exit recorded, no resolution. I didn't want to believe any of it. I still don't. But 2 weeks later at 12:17 a.m. again, my phone lit up. Red Oak Middle School main office. I didn't answer. The call went to voicemail. When I woke up the next morning, my hands shaking, I listened to the message. There was no voice this time. Just the faintest sound of footsteps on tile, followed by a soft, whispery breath that seemed far too close to the microphone. I didn't recognize the voice, but the sadness in it felt unmistakably real. And sometimes, late at night, when I pass by the darkened school, I swear I hear small footsteps echoing behind the glass, packing slowly, patiently, as if someone is still waiting for a call to be returned. I remember that night clearly because nothing about it was unusual at first. I had finished dinner late, washed the dishes, and let a quiet kind of stillness settle over the apartment as the hours crept past midnight. The living room light was off, leaving only the soft glow from the small lamp in my bedroom, casting long shadows across the hallway. My phone was on the dresser, charging, screen face down, while my tablet sat in the living room where I had left it earlier, still connected to the home Wi-Fi. The air inside felt calm and warm, the kind of warmth that makes you want to sink under the covers and forget the outside world even exists. I got into bed, pulled the blanket up to my chest, and reached over to silence any notifications before sleeping. When I flipped the phone over, I noticed the battery icon was still low, a percentage or two below what it should have been for the time it had spent charging. I hovered over the screen, thinking maybe I hadn't plugged it in properly, and that's when the first small irregularity happened. My phone lit up with an incoming call. At first, I assumed it was a spam number because it showed only my own name. My device was receiving a call from my tablet. I stared at the screen for a moment, waiting for it to stop ringing because that had to be some kind of glitch. The tablet shouldn't even be capable of calling me like that. It didn't have its SIM card inserted anymore. I'd taken it out months before. The screen kept flashing silently in the dim light, vibrating faintly against the dresser. I didn't answer. I let the call ring out completely. When it finally stopped, I forced myself to breathe normally again and told myself I'd just reconnect the devices in the morning. But then it rang again, my phone buzzing sharply against the wood, and this time it didn't display my own name. It said living room device as the caller ID. That was the name I had assigned to the tablet years ago, back when I used it mainly to stream movies. I felt a strange tug in my chest, like something inside me was telling me not to touch the phone. I let it ring while I strained my ears, listening to the silence coming from the hallway that led to the living room. There was nothing, no footsteps, no shifting, no sound at all. And that somehow felt worse. As after the second call ended, the apartment went unnaturally quiet. I don't mean ordinary quiet, I mean the kind of stillness where even the air seems to pause. I kept watching my phone screen long after it went dark, waiting for the glow to return, half expecting another incoming call. A minute passed, maybe two, and then I heard a faint sound from down the hallway. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even distinct. It was more like a soft shifting of fabric, the kind of noise you might hear when someone adjusts their posture on a couch. Except I wasn't in the living room, and no one else was. That's when the phone rang a third time. The vibration was louder now, more insistent, and I felt a rush of cold wash up my back. I picked it up this time because the silence after the last sound in the hallway made doing nothing feel worse than answering. When I swiped to accept the call, the phone didn't show a number or a name anymore, only the words incoming audio. The screen flickered once and then the call connected. I didn't speak. I pressed the device closer to my ear, listening carefully. For a few seconds there was nothing. Just a faint static hum. Then I heard breathing. It was slow at first, steady, deep, like someone inhaling right beside the microphone. The sound had weight, warmth, presence. I held the phone impossibly still, afraid that even the sound of my own breath might provoke whatever was on the other side. The breathing grew louder, more deliberate, and I could hear the subtle rasp of air brushing across the mic. It was unmistakably human, but there was no voice, no words. The device in the living room didn't have a front-facing microphone activated. I knew that. I'd turned it off myself months ago. So the breathing I was hearing wasn't coming from the tablet. I lowered the phone slowly and stared at the dark hallway beyond my bedroom door, my entire body stiff with dread. I wasn't sure which direction the sound was coming from anymore, through the phone or from somewhere closer. A soft thump echoed faintly down the hallway. Not loud, not like a footstep, more like someone had placed something on the floor gently and shifted their weight. I couldn't tell how far down the hall it was, but it was definitely inside the apartment. I felt my mouth go dry. I whispered a shaky hello into the phone, not sure whether I was addressing the call or the darkness outside my room. The breathing on the line stopped instantly, and for several seconds there was complete silence, too complete. And then the call disconnected. The sound of the disconnection tone made me jump. Before I could process it, before I could even lower the phone, I heard something much worse. the faint, unmistakable sound of something tapping on the wall just outside my bedroom. Light taps spaced evenly like knuckles brushing the surface. The air in the room turned cold so suddenly I felt goosebumps rise across my arms. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it echoed. Instinctively, I reached out and grabbed the bedroom door handle to lock it. But the moment my fingers touched it, I froze again. From the other side of the door, something tapped again, 3 slow, soft taps, and then breathing, not from the phone, from the hallway right outside my room. As I stepped backward, my breath catching in my throat. The tapping stopped, but the breathing didn't. It was shallow now, almost curious. Whoever, whatever, was on the other side of that thin wooden door was close enough that I could feel the faintest vibration through the metal handle. I held my breath, praying that silence might erase me. Then the apartment lights flickered. Now just once, enough to wash the hallway in a brief pulse of dim light through the crack beneath the door. Enough for me to see a faint shadow shift across the gap. Something was standing there perfectly still, watching, listening. And then's nothing, no tapping, no breathing, no movement. The hallway fell silent again. I stayed awake until sunrise, locked in my room, sitting on the floor with my back against the dresser. At some point during the night, the tablet in the living room powered itself off. I know because in the morning, when I finally got the courage to check, it was cold. The battery was dead even though it had been fully charged. The call log on my phone was empty. No missed calls, no received calls. No record of anything from my own devices. But there was one thing I still can't explain. When I picked up the tablet, the front camera, the one I had disabled, had been re-enabled and set to record. And the last video file saved on it was only 9 seconds long. It captured nothing but darkness. And breathing. There's something about a ringing phone in the middle of the night that feels wrong even before you answer it. Maybe it's the way it cuts through the stillness, or how the screen's glow looks too bright in a dark room. The stories you heard tonight remind us how fragile that quiet really is and how easily a single call, unexpected, uninvited, can pull something strange into our lives. Most of us like to believe we control who we let in, but the night has its own way of reaching through the cracks. And if you felt a little more aware of the shadows around you or the silence after your phone stops ringing, just know you're not the only one. We've all had moments where a call felt a second too early or too late, where the voice on the other end didn't sound quite right, or where we wondered if the line really went dead or if something was still listening. You and I share that understanding now, that thin, uneasy thread that connects anyone who has ever picked up when they shouldn't have. As this night settles, let your thoughts slow and your pulse ease back into its rhythm. And if you want more nights like this, more quiet confessions, more true stories that linger long after the lights go out, you're welcome to stay with us. Subscribe if you'd like a soft place to return to, a corner of the dark where these stories can wait for you without rushing or noise. But for now, rest. Let the phone stay silent a little longer. And if it rings, maybe this time let it ring.